Welcome to the Ambitious Dads podcast. I am your host, Jeff Hittner. After more than 200 conversations with fathers, I realized we are just not talking enough. Not about our fears, nor our ambitions, nor how our kids are really doing, or how we're holding up in the middle of it all. This podcast is for the dads trying to build something meaningful and be present at home. The ones carrying a lot, questioning if they're doing enough, and craving honest conversations without the filters. If that's you, you're not alone. You're in the right place. Let's figure this out together. So as you can see today, we're in a new spot. As my first ever Ambitious Dads podcast where we are live together. We can actually touch one another.
That's right. The living, breathing flesh.
So let me introduce my friend, my neighbor, actually, Dave Inglis. He's Canadian, and he's an executive and a couples coach who helps leaders align their ambition with their meaning. He's also, of course, a wonderful dad to a 5-year-old and a stepdad to 2 teenagers, and he lives here in Valencia, Spain with me. I'm really excited for this conversation. Welcome, Dave.
I'm so excited to hang out with you. Thanks for welcoming me into your beautiful home.
Well, my pleasure and my pleasure.
And for the coffee, I mean, we usually meet at Fave Coffee, which is right below where I live. But I got to tell you, you're going to be making a good run for their money here.
Yeah, we're trying something new today. Free coffee and interviews in my house. So let's do it.
Good. So where do you want to go?
So, one of the things that I love about like our relationship and getting to know you is hearing how distinct like your blended family is. And I haven't heard enough people talk about their experience in their blended families and what that's like. And so can you talk a little bit about the makeup of your family and maybe even like uniquely what's going on at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. So I met my wife, Jen, 13 or 14 years ago. And when I met her, she, shared with me that she had 2 great kids. At that point in time, they were Quinn and Caleb, who were 5 and 3 when I met them. So today they are 18 and 16 years old, which is hard to believe how much time has gone by. And I remember very distinctly, this was like 2018, 2019, Jenny and I, we had our kids every other day. So it was a really fun balance where we could run our businesses and do all the things that we love when it came to sport and time together. And then we had parent time where we came together those off days. And we were really deep into Ironman training and doing races together, which was a ton of fun. But I remember she pulled me aside because she was about 43 at the time. And she looks at me and she's like, Dave, if you want to be a dad, like for us to have our own, we got to either shit or get off this pot. Like I can't be waiting forever. And so, being a really great dad has always been my main mission. And I thought it was such a unique gift to be a stepdad and be a dad way earlier than I ever thought. But now being presented with this question 8 or 9 years into our marriage and into our relationship, where we've really built something quite nice, very fluid, very dynamic. It was a big proposition, this idea of like starting again, especially for Jen in her mid-40s and for all of us, right? So I actually decided, no, you know what, Jen, I think we're good. I spent a few days thinking about this.
Wow.
And I finally don't ever shared this with you, but I spent a couple weeks thinking about this and like what it meant to be a great dad. And what I kept coming back to is like the essence of being a great dad is far beyond having a biological child. It is a much bigger role to play in my community.
Sure.
And we don't need to have a 3rd kid in our family to be able to create the conditions where I can take on and live into that responsibility. And I kind of like my everyday makeup that we have right now. So we decided not to. We went and got a dog, and I shit you not, like the day after we got the dog, we came home. I'm sitting in the living room, drinking a cup of coffee, just like we are this morning, having a little fire, and Jen comes down in tears. It was December 5th. I'll never forget this, 2019. And she just bawling. I said, what's wrong? She goes, I'm pregnant. And I was like fuck, you're pregnant. There's no way you're pregnant. And sure enough, Jen was pregnant. And so just after making the choice to have the dog, we learned that we were expanding our family, and we have Will come and join us. We often joke, especially, every kid's different. Will, our youngest, is filled with energy. It's so clear to us that he's meant to be here. And he found his way, and how lucky are we? So that's how our family has evolved. And now he's 5. And we're at a spot now where when he came into this world, our kids were kind of preteens and figuring that out. We were just going through COVID. And now, having moved here to Valencia just over a year ago, we took our whole family abroad to kind of start a new adventure. And now we're settling into that. So what that looks like is our 18-year-old daughter, Quinn, is not here for year two. That's been a tough one for us. Our kids have lived with us more or less full time for the entire time. So for her to be back home in Canada and us just here with the boys, that's what our blended family looks like right now. And I was sharing with you just last week, we had my wife's ex-husband, Aaron, stay with us for just about a week. I mean, that's one of the dynamics when you move your family abroad, is that especially in a blended family, that's not just two parents trying to get along. And he came and stayed with us for a full week, which is great. And I think just so indicative of the type of blended family that we've built, where, you know, my wife can be gone back in Canada. And for me and her ex-husband to be able to hang out for an entire week, sure, it has its interesting moments, but it's also really great too, to be able to enjoy it as well. So I think we've done a damn good job building a really healthy blended family right now. It's been a lot of fun.
So many questions. So first, well, no, okay, then let's just start with your wife's ex-husband spending a week with you, and your wife not even being here. What sort of like growth and mindset shift does it take? And I know it's not instantaneous, but over probably years to get to a place where like all of these moving pieces, feel like just part of what family living is for you all.
I appreciate you recognizing the time it takes to get here. I grew up in a family, we were talking about earlier as we were making our coffees, the divorce rates in different countries. You know, my family was one where I was 7 years old, my parents went through separation. It was not a good one. The sentiment around separation was like, and even to this day, I don't think my mom has really spent much time or talked to my dad in 20 or 30 years. So that was the default that I knew when it came to divorce. You know, this whole blended family piece, when Jen and I first met, like it started so early, this integration of Aaron into our life. I remember when Jen and I were together, we had agreed not to meet the kids for the first 4 or 5 months. Makes sense. It's a pretty common decision in a lot of families. We went to a great concert together and we had a couple drinks. We were on this bus. We were like in a parking lot, and you jump on the bus and you kind of go into the music venue, right? Well, sure as shit, we get on the bus and all of a sudden she goes, "Hey, look, it's Caleb." And I'm like, "Caleb?" And sure enough, her son is just like bopping along the side of the bus. And her ex-husband was there bringing Caleb onto the bus. And that was my first moment ever meeting Caleb. Not that he remembers it. But I started to realize, and truthfully, I got evoked into this feeling of like, who is this fucking asshole here with this child? And like, that's your ex? And I could feel myself like having this defensive attitude right away. And I had learned the root cause of their separation and the dynamic around that. And we all have chips on our shoulders. One thing I was so impressed with, though, was Jen's just like really unwavering commitment to making sure that Aaron had all the space he needed to be the parent that he wanted to be with her kids. And I had so much appreciation for that. And I remember being at a cottage that next summer here. My wife's family has a great cottage up north. And we're up there 2 or 3 days. And I learned like, oh, Aaron's going to come up for a couple of days. And I'm like, what? Like your ex-husband's going to come up? So a part of the learning for me was being a participant in an environment where Aaron was already integrated. Like there was already 2 years of them being separated where he was in and out and he wasn't excluded from these family dynamics, be it Christmas or birthdays. And so the first few years were difficult for me because I had my own experience of what divorce looked like and this preconceived notion of us versus him. But much of it has just been really watching my wife. I give so much credit to her. And that's been hard at times because I tried to step away and allow the two of them to be able to do what they do. But it's been a matter of just realizing that like the dynamic of that relationship can change and will change over time. And so, kids live with us full time. That was really fun and being able to embrace that and Aaron not being around as much. And then now Quinn's actually living with Aaron full time. So I think I've come to appreciate over the years of being through this, just by seeing how our life has changed and how the kids' relationship with Aaron has changed, that this is something I don't need to resist. I can actually just start to flow with it more and more. And we were talking about this a little bit over our last coffee. There's been some moments like Quinn, for example, just because it's top of mind moving back home. Part of me thinks like that's not the right choice.
Mm.
And I could be so defended and hold on to that for so long.
This is your 18-year-old.
This is my 18-year-old. But now she's back there and I've realized, although it's difficult for me to part ways with you, I kind of like the space that I have now. So Jen's been a real leader for me in that and just helping me see this wonderful, amicable relationship that we build with people. And that doesn't mean that we're best friends, but it sure means that like when we get together and Aaron comes and stays with me for a week, we're both really clear around what our purpose is here and what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right? We're both here to be able to help both of these boys. And that's one of the things that I really was interested to see how I would feel around like Will, my little guy, being around Jen's ex-husband. But I've come to appreciate even in weeks like him being here, I'm like, how magical that another man who's a good man, and I think he's a good man because my wife chose to be with him at some point in time. And you didn't harm me or you didn't hurt me. And I'd have my own relationship with you. How great that two good men can work together in partnership over 2 weeks to take care of the two young men that we're raising in our home. And so it's so unspoken, but so clear between us. And, you know, for me, I go back to, I think a big linchpin in that is Jen. She's wanted that. That's been her aim all along, you know?
I love that. You know, one of the things that this also brings up for me in part of what you said when Quinn went back home and you actually realized you liked that space, someone who's much earlier with my kids are 5 and 8, right?
Yeah.
And so I have this feeling of guilt whenever I leave, right? And living here in Spain, I see a very different approach to parenting, which is this approach that like, you're not revolving your life around your kids, like you're revolving your life around your life, your friends, your family, and your kids tag along. And it's not like all day Saturday, all day Sunday is going to wherever your kids' sporting events are.
Right.
No, it doesn't work that way here. And so I'm torn because I'm not yet obviously at that stage where my kids are pulling away, but I'm torn by this because I see how we live it in the States, how it's like, and how I honestly love to live it right now, which is like, what am I going to do with my kids all day today on Saturday? What am I going to do with them all day today on Sunday? And then these friends that I have that are Spanish, that are the same age, have kids the same age. And they're like, I'm getting a babysitter for most of the day on Saturday because my friend's having a birthday party. And I'm like, are you on? And I'm going.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm like, but like you haven't seen your kid in a week because you're also divorced and like,
Oh, they've been at school and you work. And yeah.
Like there's no guilt there. Like that is like you are living your life. And I just wonder what that evolution is like. Can you talk a little, like, is it something that you don't even notice? Is it surprising? Because for all the 200 plus ambitious dads that I've interviewed, the ones whose kids are not yet teenagers all have this as a fear, as a worry, like their kids are going to pull away. They're not going to feel as much connection. And like now I'm seeing that's not just, I mean, so you're having it with them as teenagers, which seems normal, but I'm also seeing Spanish families, that's how they do it in general.
Mm-hmm.
What's that like?
Yeah, so I had an interesting perspective on this, I think, because it's a different feeling as a step parent than it is as a parent.
Okay.
So a shift that I've noticed just in the last 5 years. I mean, I mentioned we had our older two kids every other day.
Like, did it literally go day to day or week?
Every other day. That's like Monday, we would do drop off at school. Aaron would pick up on Monday night. He would drop them off on Tuesday morning. We'd pick up on Tuesday night. So you see the kids every day. It's a really nice rhythm. And for those who are concerned about crossing over with their exes, like it actually works pretty well too, with school being an intermediary. Not that was our primary motivation for us. But I noticed as a step parent, when it wouldn't be our day, I'd be very excited. And I would be decorating those days with my friends' birthday parties and work trips and all these really fun things. And I noticed this difference that you speak to, like when we would say goodbye to the kids, I was like, see you later, kids, have a bunch of fun. And I was already thinking of where I was going next. It was very natural. But there was this interesting tension I would watch where for 10 or 15 minutes after the kids would leave, Jen would kind of go into this like transition moment of like, man, I don't want to not be with them. And that really didn't resonate with me because I was like, what do you mean? What, just with the heavy pirate? Hey, now you and I get to go and do all these things. That being said, Will comes into this world. And now all of a sudden, you know, the feeling that you described, Jen's gone for the last 2 weeks. And here I am Friday morning already this morning talking to Will, like, what would you like to do tomorrow together? What a gift it is that we have the entire day together. And admittedly, I find myself, and I think it's a bit of a virtue of being in a new place where I don't have the same amount of friends or volume of opportunities to say, hey, I got a babysitter. Well, you're going to go and do this. I'm going to go and do that. But I find myself shifting back to like really wanting to be able to be there with him. And I think more and more, my focus has been around finding family relationships where those two things can kind of coexist at the same time. I find that to be like the nice little Venn diagram overlap, where it's like I can have a great time with you, and we can have a nice glass of tequila or shoot the shit and chat, and the kids, yeah, and the boys could be playing, having a kind of fun jam. So this is a question I often have in my mind: is like, why not both? Mm-hmm. I think sometimes I see a lot of my friends do this, where they sacrifice the things they want to do to build their entire day around the kids. Yeah. And then I see the other opposite, which is kids can go do their own thing. I'm going to go and do my thing entirely separate. I like the question, why not both?
So that's a whole nother balance challenge, right? Because one of the big things that has also come up in all my conversations with dads is the work-life balance. And now we're talking more like when we leaving the work part aside, it's what's the balance between like my personal life, my well-being, and focusing on my kids, and how do we deal with that? So there's like multiple balance challenges going on.
Yeah.
What is like, so what's your recommendation on that, or what's your experience with that? Because again, in the situation here, you're building new relationships, yep, right? Because you're in a new city and country.
Yeah.
Back home, not so much. So like, how are you looking at it? Were you in kind of evaluating it based on what you saw your son needed, or more like what you needed, or kind of checking in with that in yourself every day, every week? Like, how does that work?
To me, it's constantly this, like, I think about snowboarding as a metaphor when you kind of bring this up.
Very Canadian.
You and I both, right? But, it's hard to find the balance between those. And I feel like I'm constantly just throwing weight to where weight needs to be thrown next. And a friend of mine, Dustin, who runs Canada Snowboard, our Olympic organization back home, we were talking about work-life balance when we were biking. And he says, if you think about snowboarding, the only time you're ever balanced is when you're not going anywhere.
That's true.
I'm like, oh, okay. That's actually a really interesting, I understand that, being a snowboarder, and just, intuitively that makes sense. So if we're choosing to have an ambitious life, of which a big part of your audience is exactly that, ambitious dads, it means that we're going to be going places, which means that we need to be constantly throwing our weight back and forth. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's where having structural discipline in my life to be able to have time alone, like I use solitude a lot, in smaller and in bigger chunks, to be able to actually just listen. Like, does it feel right now? Or do I need to throw away somewhere else?
How do you listen to yourself?
Solitude, truly. Like, I will go away, last year in March, I think it was telling you this, my wife's family was here for 3 weeks. And right after that,
I would go away too.
Right after that, I was like, okay, I need 3 or 4 days just to be able to regroup. And for me, it's become a ritual that I had built, not a routine. I distinguish the difference between the two, in that this ritual makes a positive change in me. And it allows me to kind of come back to, really hearing what I think is my voice, and not just this like expectation or the drive and the rhythm that's just around me that I'm a part of. So solitude is a huge part of that.
Within that solitude, though, what is the activity that you're doing? Are you just thinking and walking? Are you meditating? I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, men have a lot of solitude these days.
Yep.
They don't have as many friends as was the norm, let's say, a generation ago. So I don't feel like it's the solitude itself. It's like, so what's going on in those moments for you?
Yeah, it's a very valid point. I think it's a very, very valid point, in that there is something called active solitude, right? Like, what are you actually doing in that space? There's a couple things that come to mind. I like writing a lot. I mean, I spend a lot of my time writing books, and it just seems to be a good outlet for me to be able to kind of see like what's coming through. But I'll share something a bit more personal and esoteric. Over the last 10 years, I got introduced to shamanism. And part of this was because I was struggling to just kind of move through some of the tension I felt in my relationship with my dad personally. And I was doing craniosacral therapy one day with a massage therapist or somebody who was Reiki. And they said, you should go and meet a shaman. I'm like, what the fuck is a shaman? And my preconceived notion of that was plant medicine, Amazon, multiple days, and thinking that was what the invitation was. And I started to realize and to learn after doing a bit of digging after that shamans are individuals who traverse these different realms, as they describe it, to bring back essence or parts of yourself that you've lost through different challenges in your life. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go and meet a shaman. I met this great guy, Danielle, in downtown Toronto, and he did something called a soul retrieval ceremony for me, which was really interesting. And a big part of the modality and the medium of that, Jeff, was Indigenous drumming. Using drumming as this methodology of creating these trance-like states of how shamans kind of go and do their work. And I remember I share this because right after that, I said to him, you're a really nice guy. Do I need to come back and see you? Or can I learn how to do self-inquiry in this way on my own? It's like, no, you can learn. Absolutely. There's a technique to this. And so over the last 10 years, I've embarked not with a vocational interest around it, but just a personal curiosity, because that experience with Danielle was really impactful on me and my relationship with my dad and my personal healing. To be able to say, what would it look like for me to be able to have a practice like shamanic drumming that puts me in a state where I feel like my description of it is I'm deeply connected to my heart in that state. I'm deeply connected to my subconscious. And in that state, then I can start to ask questions that are going to help enable me to move forward in a way that's directionally correct and being able to maybe see some of the things that I'm not privy to right now. Right.
I love that.
And so I guess to answer your question, if I may, like in solitude, I will often create ceremony for myself to be able to go with some consistent questions that are very much forward looking. And what is asking of my attention that I'm not seeing right now? That's a question I'm often sitting with. And a lot of times that might be family stuff that comes up, but it's also, beyond my kind of core circle. It's my extended family. It's my friends. It's other decisions in my family's life as well. So that's what happens in my solitude space, is some personal ceremony that I've learned to create within there.
And so then within that ceremony, some questions are bubbling up that you then just sort of kind of keep in your mind as you are practicing your solitude for however many days that you're on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I've done now over the last 4 or 5 years some pretty advanced training in this practice of shamanism to be able to learn that skill a little bit better. But generally speaking, it's very consistent, the types of questions that I'm inquiring around. And what
share some of those questions?
Yeah, like the one I had just mentioned here, like what is asking my attention that I'm not giving it right now? What part of me does the world not see? And that's often when I kind of start to be able to inquire a little bit more about like, what am I not nurturing within myself? Right. And just going in with those types of questions and just kind of like listening at a deeper level, what feels right there? What is no longer serving me? I often sit with that, right? I've often contemplated with my relationship with alcohol and marijuana, things that we always think about. And so in those spaces, I'll often kind of check in, like, how am I doing on those types of things? Is it getting in the way of a life well lived, or is it supporting one, right? So those are some of those questions. But where it inevitably always leads to for me is I always choose to leave something behind in those solitude moments. I call it strategic solitude. It's something I do every 3 or 4 months. And I will typically, over the course of that retreat or that time away, build a physical bundle of something. At the end of the 3 or 4 days, I'll just create a fire and burn. Yeah. And it's just a way of me just kind of almost like Fias here. One of the things I love about Valencia, every year in March, they build these wonderful installations that are a totem and an artifact that represents the trauma and the joys of the years past and being able to intentionally move through that. And so, hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into some of the questions that I bring into that. But the ceremonial nature to the space that I have for myself is a way of being able to cultivate like inner guidance.
I really appreciate you sharing this, because I think one of the sort of throughputs through a lot of these conversations, a lot of these interviews I've had with other dads on this podcast is the dads that have done the work and have figured out how to connect with their children are the same dads that have figured out how to go more deep with themselves.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate and each one does it in a different way.
Totally.
So that's really, really appreciated that you kind of share what your ritual is for yourself. I was curious, going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. So
yeah,
you decide that you don't want to have more children, and all of a sudden Jen comes down the stairs and says, "Surprise, I'm pregnant." So how does your mindset shift? Because another big piece of fatherhood is being able to let go and transform our mindsets all the time, because the only thing that's consistent in fatherhood is change. So what was that experience like? Was it super quick? Was it something that you like kind of had to also grow into?
So I have a bit of a funny story around this because I think it has a direct relationship to the fact that Will was conceived in the way that he was.
We don't need to go to that level.
So December 5th, and I know this day because of its significance when we found out that we were having Will. That means that he was conceived in a month before that. And I think back quite often that I did in the day or two after I found out we were having Will. So what was happening at that point in time? Not to go into the details, but my wife's a physician. She does a lot of fertility work. Based on what she shared with me, there shouldn't have been a child being conceived. I remember in the early part of November, really struggling personally, struggling with my business, struggling to kind of figure out like, what is my life's work? Things that I thought I had together seemingly just like falling apart in front of me. And I remember we have a big sauna in our backyard, part of how we survive the Canadian winters. And I remember being in there alone. It almost brings back emotion recalling this experience. And I started yelling. I think I was yelling to God or something bigger than myself. But the words that kept coming out of my mouth was, I am fucking done trying to have this all figured out. I'm fucked up. And I remember crying in the sauna. I remember just like yelling. And it was one of those moments where I was fucking done. And I think it was my way of having like a proclamation of like, I am done controlling things. And pretty much like, I give up, I surrender. And I remember there was almost like this like cold draft that entered the room, and they would give me like chicken skin and goosebumps. And it just felt like in that moment that it was really kind of crystallized in me that like, I have to stop trying to control my life. I have to stop looking for ground around me when the reality of my life is groundless. Like, I don't know what's actually good or bad to me. There's been so many things that I thought were bad to me that turned out to be good for me that I've learned that I don't really know. Yet I still try and control. And so in that sauna is when I did that. And I firmly believe, this is not a story I've actually really ever told. I firmly believe that it was in the surrendering of that William came right after, where it was like, great, you don't want to control things? And then you don't want to be a dad, right? And so it's a bit of an interesting question you asked, because to me, I feel like my choice to change my mindset actually preceded having William. Mm. It wasn't necessarily something I had to shift afterwards. Now, did I have to evolve my mindsets afterwards? Most certainly, for sure. That's when the whole blended dynamic of, me being with Will and Jen and the kids and what that looked like, there was lots of other things that had to change. But as far as like relinquishing control and embracing the groundless nature of life, let alone life with kids, that was my moment, like very clearly in my mind.
Thank you so much for sharing that, like, very sort of life-shifting moment. And I feel letting go is a real big theme in my life right now too. And I'd love to explore it a little more, because in general, parenthood, particularly in the US and in Canada, is an art form in the opposite. It's like, and part of that is built into the system that we live in, right? Like, you've both got careers and you have your day super structured, and then your kids have all these activities right after school, and like letting go means like you drop one ball and like they all fall down, and like your kids can't get to their stuff, and you miss a meeting here, and we see that whenever there's a snow day, or whenever there's someone in the family is sick, and like it all goes to shit. So what does letting go, I mean, you explained what it felt like in that moment, but then from an action standpoint, what is it like, because it's not something that just happens when you scream in the sauna, sure, mate. And so what is it like, how does it feel like a continuous process because my experience is that it needs to be a continuous process. So for you, what is that process of letting go?
Yeah, so we talk about letting go. I often think about the distinction between rigor and rigidity.
Mm.
I think it's good to have rigor in your life. Discipline, organization, clarity. It's good to have that rigor. Rigidity, though, is different in that it comes from the desire to control things. And I think that's the big distinction between having rigor and good values and a way of living and designing your life in such a way, and rigidity where it's too much. So, I mean, somebody has to be driving the car at the end of the day, right? Especially when you're with the family, like you do need to have those pieces in place. But as far as rigidity, like, let me tell you a quick story that, comes to mind for me around this from the summer. My wife Jen and I were down visiting some friends in Colorado. I love Colorado, one of my favorite states in the US. And as we're there, we were out in the backyard hanging out with some friends. His name's Hunter, and his wife's Megan. Incredible people. We're meeting their two young loves. And their little son is playing with, those like water tables that they have?
Yeah.
Right? Well, he's playing with the water table. We're all outside. And within the first 15 minutes, he wanted to jump to the sprinkler. I'm all in. We're having a ball. And in many ways, like I'm having a lot of fun with somebody else's kids because mine aren't there. Right. And I'm just really soaking it up. And at one point, we're trying to get a banana into Ollie, and we're trying to kind of get the day going and finish up our sprinkler session. And he's playing with the water table. And his dad was asking, like, hey, let's go. Hey, let's go. Hey, let's go. And his dad was quite a bit further away in the backyard. I'm right beside Ollie at this point in time. And down on his foot, I can see there's a little like piece of grass that's stuck on his foot. And he's not listening because he's so focused on trying to get this like little piece of grass.
My kids are always like that.
Off his foot, right? And right away it went to like, you're not listening. Let's go upstairs. We're going to go and have a break. So, oh, wow, okay, great. Off he goes, comes back down. Day goes on and we're sitting down, and it was so fun to be able to get to know this family better, see their dynamics. And so at this point, it's just me, Jen, and Megan Hunter having a beer. And at one of the beer gardens down the road. And they say, so, any observations you have about our kids and things? And my wife does pediatric mental health, so she's super smart in this space. And we started talking about the play table incident and going upstairs. And what was that like? And what was kind of going on? And did you see that he had a piece of grass on his foot? And just thought that it was interesting to kind of go upstairs. And how do you guys do that quite often, right? Rigidity. You should listen to me. You need to listen to me, or you don't listen to me. We need to now go upstairs, right? Not an uncommon thing and pretty simple. But where we kind of came to this was talking about, like, what are we attached to? What is the thing we're actually trying to control? And my dear friend Hunter, one of the most remarkable guys I know, like, he is somebody who is extremely thoughtful. And he would, and in this moment in our conversation, very clearly was like, no, I'm not attached to anything. Like, I'm not attached to him having to listen to me or do all these things. I really practice non-attachment in my life. And to my wife's credit, Jen, she asked, well, then let's kind of examine what took place with the whole listening thing here. Like, could it be possible that you're attached to Ollie turning out to be a really good kid? And it just like stopped the conversation. And he's like, whoa. Yeah, that's actually like, I really find myself not attached to most things, my home, my belongings, all those things. But if there was one thing I really do care about, it's like to make sure that he turns out to be a good kid.
We can all relate.
We can all relate to that. And we can all relate to the intensity of like, no, you need to listen and coming in with that level of intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, as I'm sitting here watching this, Jen says to Hunter, what makes you think that you keeping him accountable just to listening to you in that moment is going to have an asymmetrical influence on who he becomes? Because the reality is out of 100 things that this kid's going to go through to become who he becomes, listening to you in the water table is one of those 100 things. But the way that you're intervening with it acts as if it is 90 of those 100 things. That you have this ungodly influence of who he becomes when you're with him. Mm. And so that was a really interesting conversation that we had that I think just kind of illuminates, like, what are we actually trying to control? What are we holding on to? And I think at a much deeper level, we have hidden commitments within ourselves. We've talked about this, right? It's like we're committed to being really good parents or being somebody who makes sure our kids don't turn like us or don't have to struggle with the things that we go through. So I believe that like the intention behind a lot of our desire for control comes from a good place. But I think it comes down to like getting the realm just right. what does rigor look like and what does rigidity look like? What is the permeability, right? Like how much you actually kind of let through in your life without holding on for that level of control. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it's super powerful because I always, and I've spoken to a lot of dads too, that it's the same thing. We always extrapolate. It's like if I bend the rules in this moment, I see that my kid needs them bent in this moment, but what does that mean about what I am helping him to become?
Right.
Right. And it's like, and so that's the rigidity. Right. And I think often dads whose mindsets are very much planning for the future are always thinking so much about that, as you were saying, that they think that every decision is 90 of the 100 like data points that is going to make up their child, as opposed to not even one, right? Like even a fraction of one. So that's a really powerful example. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
It was a powerful example for me too, right? Because sometimes, and I've learned this in the work that I do in the world, like it's a lot easier for me sometimes to learn things about myself by watching somebody else. And so that conversation, I shared with you, because it had an impact on me. I could see myself and the dynamic between Hunter and Ollie. It was so genuine. It was so sincere. And it was easy for me to be able to see the defended version of Hunter and how it comes in. And we all have one. And I think one of the things that I've certainly been guilty of in the past, was how do I get rid of this part of myself? How do I get rid of it? How do I cut it out? And I started to realize the more I tried to exile these like defended ways that I had, the more they just started fucking popping in weird spaces and weird moments and weird times. Instead of just accepting my whole self of like, I have defended parts and they come from these areas. It's not in control, but they're there. Right. And so being able to kind of parent or lead from the higher self, which I think comes from acknowledging those defended elements, is a part of learning how to be more undefended in those moments and walking that fine line of rigor versus rigidity.
And it extends far beyond parenting.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
Thank you. Thank you. I love when I get to have these conversations and then take more insight in for my own life. This is basically why I do all of this work. It's very selfish.
Yeah, that's okay.
So I love to end all of my podcasts with this notion that, being a dad is messy. Fatherhood, parenthood is messy. So can you share with me like one messy story, maybe a diaper blowout or a projectile vomit or something from your life as a father that still stays with you?
Oh, gosh. Especially with the young boy right now, I have no shortage of examples that kind of come to mind. I'm trying to think, as you mentioned, the idea of life being messy, what immediately jumped into my heart, though, was like how important it is to have kitchen stories. And what I mean by that is, I think as dads, we sometimes come together and the nature of how we talk about, like, I think of it like a really nice restaurant. We have the dining room and then you have the threshold that walks into the kitchen. And I think it's a good metaphor for all of our lives. Like I have a dining room version of my life. It's nice. It's put together and you can come and visit it anytime you want. But it's not the real me. There's the kitchen, right? And I think having
sausages, maybe
100%, right? And where it's messy and where things break, like having more and more kitchen conversations, if you follow me on that, I think is what we need more of in general. But messy stories, some good ones there. Oh man, I wish I would have known this question earlier. Can come with a good catalog of them. Shoot, I'm struggling to draw one, to be honest.
That's fun. All right.
Yeah. You know what? We got a good one, actually. So this just happened 2 weeks ago. And it's a story that I know by proxy only that like it happened to my wife when I wasn't here, which I think is part of the dilemma of like being parents doing interesting things and dividing and conquering. So we rent a car here on a subscription. And every 3 months you're going to have to return it. Long story short, last time I went to go return it, poor Jenny, she it was dirty. We didn't know that you had to like vacuum it or else they would do a big charge on you. So she goes and brings it back. They say, no, it needs to be clean. She goes and does it. Fast forward 3 months later, and 2 weeks ago, I'm away in Quebec. I'm like in the mountains on retreat by myself. And I get this call from Jen and she's like, hey, like we have a big issue. She went and picked up Will from soccer, gave him a bite to eat on the way to Calum soccer. He's looking down and playing a little game in his lap and gets car sick. Projectile vomits everywhere inside of the car. And then this is where it gets really good. We go and pick up Caleb. As she picks up Caleb on the way, the car breaks down on the highway, starts to smoke. She finally gets into the parking lot, picks up Caleb. The car won't start. She has to call her car rental company to come pick up the car. It is not just like dirty. It is projectile vomit.
Oh my God.
Dirty. And she's like, this car's broken, would have cleaned it. But hey, in the Uber we go and away we go. So I mean, my gosh, there's so many poopy and projectile vomit stories, but those are some pretty messy ones, and those are always the best ones too, right? Like as long as you can kind of laugh at the end of the day,
and tell someone else to clean it,
and tell someone else to clean it, even better.
Dave, thank you so much for sharing, for being vulnerable, for talking about your family. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thanks for having me. So good.
I want to hug.
Hey, dude. Very cool. Well, thanks, dude.